Are we good?
Mm-hmm.
That would be it.
I'm just going to introduce really quickly our three presenters today who are, I feel like now, dear friends and amazing resources for English Biachad. We have Queenie Rich, who I've known now for many, many years. She volunteered with Skilled Volunteers for Israel in Yerucham, like in 2015 or something crazy
Wow.
like that. Then we
I
have
was a kid.
she was a child at the time, yeah. Linda Maslin, who's sitting in Jerusalem, and also, as you'll hear, comes from England originally, and has volunteered with us also in person many years ago, and has joined our program. And Debbie Kamyaner, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, who splits her
You
time
got it right.
Jerusalem and New York, and who I haven't yet had the opportunity to meet in person, but all three of these amazing women have experience that they've been able to share and help volunteers improve their resumes. And there's a role that you are often asked to play by your students, and we thought that they could give you some guided suggestions in terms of how to do that most effectively, even if you don't have a HR background or an IT background or any background that's directly related to your students. So I'm going to, we're recording this so that it's going to be available to you and to other tutors who couldn't make today's session. And welcome to all of you, and take it away, Debbie, Linda, and Queenie.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I'm Debbie. It's nice to meet everybody virtually. A couple of housekeeping requests, and that is, first of all, if you could mute your audio so that in case there's any background noise, it doesn't interfere. We're looking to keep this to about half an hour if possible. There is a raise hand option. I don't know whether you're aware of it in Zoom at the bottom of your screen where it says reactions. If you click on that, you can raise your hand. So if you have a question, that may be the best way. And I hope that you will have questions, and we're really very happy to answer them. And as Marla said, we have resumes, we have background working with resumes, and we are hoping to just give you some tools and strategies that will help you get your tutees on their way. We know that, they wouldn't expect, I'm sure they would not expect you to have expertise, but I'm hoping that some of the tools that we give you will help you get them started in the process. Several of you have asked about that, and your students have asked you about it. So we're hoping you have questions. We're hoping we can help you out. We don't want to overwhelm you. There is a lot of information that goes into resumes. And I will say that the three of us will be available at any time if you have questions. If you have a particular question about a resume and you'd like to bring us in for a consult, we're all happy. I hope Queenie and Linda, I'm sure they won't mind my volunteering them as well. So we'll certainly be happy to do that. And the objective of a good resume is to improve the chances of the candidate, right? So what we want to be able to do, sometimes people put together resumes, and the ones that they start out with generally need some work because I think people don't always understand that a resume should sort of whet the appetite rather than just be a listing of what they can do or what they have done. And so it should show potential. It should also show experience. Another really important part of the resume is keywords. The wording in the resume should include words that are relevant to the jobs that they want. There are a couple of reasons for this. The first is that most of these resumes will go into databases. When they send in a resume, it's going to end up in a database. And the database will look at the resumes and will surface only those that have the keywords in them. So it's really important that people use those keywords, some of which Queenie and Linda are going to speak about when they give you samples of resumes in terms of how we can use those. The other thing is that keywords are really important for LinkedIn profiles. Having been a recruiter in a former life for 4 years, towards the end of my tenure, which was very recently before I retired, the keywords in my primary recruiting tool was LinkedIn. So I didn't only look at resumes that came in, I actively recruited through LinkedIn, and that is a wonderful resource for people. And I think that many of our candidates don't understand, and you can help them understand that their LinkedIn profiles should basically be duplicates of their resumes, so that if a recruiter is searching through LinkedIn for somebody with their background or with their skill set, they can pick up on it from the profile. This is a marvelous way for them to find a job. And Marla is suggesting, and I think it's a great idea, that maybe we can do a session on LinkedIn specifically. I've done dozens of them, if not more. I've lost count, and I'm sure we can all get together on that as well. There is no right or wrong way to do a resume. I've seen several different formats. Your candidates, your people may have more creative formats. I think those are fine. But again, the other thing that you can help them do, obviously, you can help them with their English. And that is going to be really just essential for them, because obviously we all know what happens when just like the smallest phrase or word off reflects on their capabilities. Marla will share our emails on the blog and in newsletters, again, in case you want to get in touch with us. So our primary motto when we're talking about resumes is that less is more. First of all, resumes should be one page. I have yet to find somebody who comes to me as an initially with a new resume that they've constructed that's on one page. Most of the time it's on at least two, sometimes 3 or 4, because they space it out so much, or they just include so much information. And so I love that idea that less is more, that we need to be as brief as possible. And what I always tell candidates is that you want the person who's looking at the resume you want their impression to be one that it's easy to read, that the information is there quickly. You have, like, I would say that a recruiter will look at a resume. If you're reviewing 100 at a clip, you look at a resume for 5 to 6 seconds to get just a quick overview, to get a sense of whether or not the person is going to be right. This is why the length of it is important, the presentation of it is important. If there's interest, you go a little further and you read it in detail. At the top of the resume, I'm just going to talk a little bit about structure. So at the top of the resume, we need to make sure that their LinkedIn address and their GitHub link is at the top, and make sure that both of those sites, LinkedIn and GitHub, again, I'm going to repeat this because it's really important, are robust, and that they're really completely filled out and that they're appropriate. Make sure that the top of the resume is easy to read, that the formatting that they're using, that the fonts that they're using are easy to read. Make sure that the email and the voicemail are appropriate. This is really, it's not as much of an issue anymore. It has been an issue in the past, but check out the email and make sure that it is actually their name at whatever, Gmail or whatever. Marla, you're wondering about GitHub. So the GitHub is a site on which a candidate can display their technical projects, technology projects. And most of them will have GitHub sites, but again, just visit it and make sure that it's set up well, and that it includes, that visually it's appealing, and that the projects that they're showing are, and we can't judge whether they're appropriate necessarily, but at least that it's set up in a way that's going to reflect on them positively. Again, it's one page optimally. Margins and text size are 2 factors you can work with if you need, or they can work with, if you need to decrease the size of the resume. So most people have margins that are like this big, text that's that big. They can decrease their margins. They can also decrease their text size. They don't have to be in a 14-point font, and that will help them save space. And we're going to talk also, and I think Queenie and Linda are going to cover how to phrase things in a way that will enable them to keep it on one page. Another thing, very, very, very important, any resume that they send out should be. So Ruth is asking what is reasonable font size, and I would say probably 11 or 12 point. Smaller than that, as one who has trouble reading small font, I would say smaller than that begins to look tiny. Every resume should be sent out.
February.
Pardon me? The other thing is that the PDF format, every resume that goes out should be in PDF. People write them in Microsoft Word or they write them in Google Docs, but when I read them on, if a candidate wants to make sure that what I see is the format that they want, they first convert it to PDF. They'll all know how to do it. Just make sure to suggest that to them, because it's not something they automatically think of. And again, if it's easier to read, it'll help people understand their value. I saw something come up. Let me take a quick look. And Michelle was told to have URLs in the cover letter, not the resume. Linda and Queenie, what do you think of that?
Well, sometimes they don't even ask for a cover letter. So I think the PDF format,
Right.
unless it's a specific request.
Well, just in terms of the URLs, I would say to have it on the resume. If there's a request, as Queenie said, to have a cover letter and to actually include the URLs in the cover letter, then you absolutely can include it. But otherwise, I would say it's not so necessary. I think personally, I'm gonna. Go ahead,
if you
sorry.
put it in the resume, you run the risk that the email will not allow it. Your destination email will filter it because there's a URL in there.
I haven't found that. I've seen a lot of resumes that have come through a database, and I haven't seen that. I hear what you're saying. I will say, I'm going to confess, I spent even less time reading cover letters than I did resumes.
Okay.
So I glanced at a cover letter very, very quickly. It was really the resume that was the important thing for me. So I would say.
Can I just butt in there? Unless there's a reference for the job, and sometimes the cover letter, you might need to put the reference, the job reference. That's the only thing. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That's a good point. So sometimes that is a link, and sometimes it's just a written out. It's a good question, Michelle. Thank you. All right, I'm going to hand it off to Queenie at this point, who's going to talk about content.
Thanks, Debbie. So, hi, everybody. Good to see you here. And I just want to build on what Debbie was saying. One word she used over and over again was the word keywords. And for some of you, you might be wondering, what's a keyword? Many of you know it. But one of the things you might want to do with your student is actually look at some job descriptions that they're applying for. And what is it that the employer, the recruiter is looking for? And those would be the key words that you want to match what they're asking for. So if they're looking for specific skill sets, make sure that the student is addressing that. Those are the kind of things you can help with. As a tutor, you're just looking at it with fresh eyes. So like Debbie said, anything that you can do to help give them an advantage, because as we said, they scan them so quickly, you want to make sure that your student doesn't end up in the no pile. You want them to get to at least the yes or the maybe pile. So the grammar should be good. It should look clean. But then there are so many other things that you can do to help them. So look at it from the perspective of an employer, and you say, what looks like it's missing? You're applying for a job in the tech field. Are you mentioning any skills that are related to that? It's going to be a very busy work environment. Are you mentioning anything related to that? So I'm going to share the screen right now of an example of what a student wrote here. And he started off by saying, can everybody see this one, the top one? Courier in the Israel Post. I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Yes.
Okay.
We can see it.
Okay, delivery of letters and packages from warehouse to the customers. So if an employer or recruiter is looking at that, how does that tie in? Are there any transferable skills there to the tech industry or the job they're applying for? So you discuss it with the student and you try and say, well, when you were delivering the letters and the packages, what did you have to do? And did you work slowly? Did you have to work quickly? Was it in a certain time frame? So one way to maybe rephrase it is proven ability to multitask and work under challenging or tight timelines. Do you see how the wording gets changed to help? The next example, control operator, providing telephone answers to mall customers and in the security field, monitoring and viewing the cameras, handling the alarm and fire extinguishing systems. Those are all good skills, but how does it relate back to what the employer might be looking for? So again, to change it to something like responsible, that's a strong word, responsible 24/7 for a set of computers, highly proficient, monitored. So again, one of the things that we're wanting to stress with you is strong action verbs is very important. Usually when people talk about themselves, they undersell themselves. So they'll say, I just did this, or I assisted, or I helped, but those aren't very, very strong words. So what you want to do is talk to them about it. They'll say to you, well, all I did was I worked at the cash and I had to work with customers at the cash. And sometimes I had to put things on the shelves, or I had to look for a product that the customer couldn't find. Can anybody think of what you might possibly say that would be a transferable skill? Anybody? Rather than I worked at the cash. Handle, go ahead, Sherry.
Proficiency in US dollars, or proficiency in shekalim, or
Good, good. Somebody else?
Assessed and prioritized customer requests in a timely manner.
Great.
Ooh, great.
Yeah, skilled at handling.
We're going to write that one down.
Yeah, skilled at handling challenging customers in a professional manner. Because sometimes they come and they yell at you and they want things and they boss you around. So again, it's trying to phrase it in a way that it sounds very positive. Let me see, I have an example here of some positive words that I want to share with you. And then I'm going to, okay, so here are the strong words. Accomplished, analyzed, collaborated, evaluated, developed. People usually don't use strong words like that. Initiated, organized, produced. And what I'm going to do afterwards is I'm going to take that document and I'll share it in the chat for you, or we can email it to you so you'll have it. But again, it's just helping them recognize strong, solid words rather than underselling themselves. Any particular questions?
I would also want to add in that they can also be accomplishment oriented. If their contribution in that retail environment helped raise the sales of the store, or in some way reorganize the store in a way that enabled customers or enabled the sales force, these are also things that people frequently leave them out. When you start questioning them, all of a sudden you realize that they did make valuable contributions, and every employer wants to know that they're hiring people or they're looking at people who are capable of enabling that kind of success for their organization.
And you all have those daily conversations with your students. So for example, you say to them, what did you do based on what Debbie just said? What have you done when you were working in the store? And they might say, well, I noticed that a lot of the product was on a very high shelf, and a lot of the customers who came in weren't tall enough to reach it. So I spent 40% of my time trying to reach product for customers. So I helped with the efficiency by speaking to management, and we put the product on a lower shelf, et cetera, et cetera. So then they feel good about themselves as well, because they realize they do have transferable skills to other areas. Marla?
I just want to mention that Ruth Sure has been waiting with a question. She put it in a comment, and I don't know if you guys will have, if you want to wait till you're done.
No,
or-
jump in.
So
No.
there's Ruth and Larry has his hand up too. So I'll let you guys handle that.
So there
Okay.
was,
Go ahead.
there's an important thing because my student already had to start working on his CV. So we began a little bit about it. So, he told me about what he was doing in Israel. And then I said, well, what about back in Ethiopia? And he said, well, my friends tell me that we shouldn't include that because it's not anything of any help or any worth. Well, I said, well, why? And so I said, well, what did you do? And then, what he did was impressive stuff. I mean, he basically, as an example, he was a student and he had no money. So he worked and supported himself to be able to go to university. But he worked as a contractor and he led teams. And so he was organized and he was a leader and all that. So I tried to explain that to him because he said, well, I don't see how this is of any value. And then so I just kept on reiterating how it's the skill set, because they don't
Yes.
appreciate the fact that maybe they did menial work. He said, well, I was just a painter. I said, well, no, you weren't just a painter, and so we had to go through that whole thing. So it's a whole process they have to learn. And it seems like no one's currently guiding them with that, because they said, well, just write everything down. And they're literally omitting their skill sets from back home, which are, I think, amazing.
Ruth, I'll jump in on what you said, and absolutely what you said was perfect, right on. Anything that's a transferable skill, and unfortunately, many of them they use it, I call it a 4-letter word. They use just or only. I was just a painter. No, you weren't just a painter. You have so many transferable skills. So it's you, their tutor, who get to know them and you go, wow, I see so many skills that you have. You're just not highlighting it. You have to shine a light on all your skill sets. So that's a perfect example. Larry, you had a question?
Oh, yes, I had a question and a comment. I was thinking that something to keep in mind is that the people reading these resumes may not be native English speakers. So I would think, or my question is it better to use short phrases with key words than to start writing a long explanation, because chances are the person reading it may not understand that?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a happy medium. You also don't want to make it too basic that it sounds like they don't have the proficiency to dialogue in English. So you're absolutely right. You don't want to use, and when I work with a student, you never use words that they don't understand. So you wouldn't say highly efficient if they don't know the word efficient.
Right. In my case, also, the student was or is an attorney. So he doesn't want a job in that, but it doesn't transfer directly. But I discussed with him, you have so much experience in analyzing information. So include that you're used to seeing different data, because the job is for data analysis. So hopefully that will work.
Absolutely.
That's great. I think Sheldon has his hand up also.
Yes, I do. So I was going to ask this question later. How important is their background story altogether that maybe isn't work related, but the very fact that they moved from Ethiopia, that they've learned English, that they have determination, stick-to-itiveness, some of those other skills that aren't really, they really are work skills, but they didn't develop those skills necessarily in a work situation. Should we talk at all in their resume, even if it's just a sentence or two, about those overall personality skills? They care for other people. They are working, they're going to school, they're doing 6 things at one time to try to get ahead. As an employer, I would find that really important.
And
I would
so-
agree that it's, oh, sorry, go ahead,
ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it's okay, Debbie, go ahead.
I would say that's important, but I would probably not include it on the resume because it's just too much information. And it will obscure the stuff that we want people to notice.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to necessarily, I don't think that somebody's going to establish a preference for a resume because somebody has overcome difficulty. I think during the course of the interview, that's very impressive. But when you're talking about the resume, it's really at that initial stage, what will whet the appetite is what kind of skills somebody brings in, both in terms of their soft skills and their hard skills.
But
I
Debbie,
agree with you, Debbie. Yeah,
Some of the
it wouldn't turn me on at all if I was sorting through.
well, I say that some of the things that Sheldon mentioned, some of them could be highlighted in a profile. So
Right.
not necessarily, I moved from Ethiopia, but the ability to multitask, a quick learner,
Persistent.
persistent, work
Mhm.
well independently and work with other people, have the ability to train and work with others and share skill sets. So those are all those, as long as it's framed in a way that it looks like a transferable skill.
One of the things that Julie said, if I may jump in here, if you haven't watched it, those people who are on tonight, it's really worth watching. But she said that, for example, if somebody is applying to X company here in Israel, they need to look into what that company does, how long it's been in, it's been going, and maybe use some of the words that they've used in their blurb on their website to bring into their resume. So it's, I think that shows that they've done a little bit of homework.
But as tutors, you're doing more than helping them with their resumes. You're helping them with their job hunting. So
Yeah.
helping them, even this discussion, and Debbie mentioned it before along with Linda, anything that they can say when they're having an interview to make them stand out in the crowd, then that's the time to use it. So there's so many things that you can do as a tutor to help them. It's to give them the confidence and the self-esteem not to use 4-letter words like just and only, because you are so capable and look at all the things you've done. Let's just find a way to rephrase it or reframe it. What else you can do is you could look at their resume and say, oh, like Linda mentioned it earlier, that's a definite no-no because your email address says littlefloozy@gmail.com. This is not the way you want to sell yourself to a prospective employer. It has to be professional. You look at their LinkedIn, you look at their GitHub. Is the language proper? Is it spelled properly? So don't worry about concentrating so much even on the resume. It's about giving them all the skill sets around job hunting.
I want to just interject that Michelle had an interesting question about how truthful somebody needs to be about their skill level, I guess, with English, with technology. I would say specifically with English, it's important that they be honest, but be kind to themselves. Every person I've dealt with tells me, oh, I don't speak English well at all. And actually, they do speak English surprisingly well. So but they should be honest because both my 2 children both work in high tech here in Israel, and they have undergone interviews in both English and Hebrew. And so the series of interviews is going to include an English assessment. It's important that they be honest, but that they need to treat themselves kindly. And you can help them. We can definitely help them assess how they evaluate their skills.
That's an excellent point. Do we have,
Okay.
Marla, do you see any other questions in chat that we can address? No?
Oh, I had a quick question on that,
Go
if I
ahead.
may. So you were saying about English, just for a quick statement on a resume, should they say fluent in English, fluent in verbal English? How would you describe it simply? If they
Proficient,
can't speak English, but maybe their written English isn't so good.
so maybe proficient in.
Conversational.
Okay.
Susan, I think, had a question.
Talia has raised her hand.
Yes, I have a question, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure why my camera's not working. I'm at work, and I guess we have some tech issues. I'm originally from Israel, but I haven't been in the HR space there, so I have two questions that came up with my student. First of all, he puts his date of birth on his resume, and when I was surprised, he said that's customary in Israel to put your date of birth on your resume.
It is in the United States. It's almost
A big
illegal. It's not
no-no.
illegal, but it's a real no-no.
Okay.
Yeah, people do it commonly here. Not everybody does it anymore, but people have traditionally, that's something they do.
And they
Okay,
also,
and my second, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say also at the top, they sometimes put the city where they are. And that's not necessary
Yes.
unless they want to just work in a specific area. They're limiting their opportunity by maybe saying
Right.
exactly where they're living.
Okay. And my second question is about the military service. So I can kind of see both sides, but the student I'm working with, he went to Sayeret Golani, which is the elite unit of the infantry. So it has a lot of meaning to Israelis, but how much? He wanted to write a lot about his military service, which, great, and he became a sergeant and he won an award. But, what's the balance about military service experience?
I think something like Golani would be appropriate to mention, and I think there absolutely should be at least a one item about their military service. I've seen resumes though where half the resume is military service, so it has to be properly balanced given whatever other experience they have.
But
Susan,
think
I know.
promote-
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say the words that you mentioned: awarded,
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
promoted. These are all positive things. So
If you're a Chayal Mitzdayen, that's
Yeah,
absolutely
those are
something that should
things
be
that-
mentioned.
those are things that should definitely be included.
Okay, cool,
Susan.
thank you.
Yeah, so my question, which I put in the chat, because I've been working with my student on the covering letter, because I thought that was really where he was going to need a lot of support because of his English language skills. But of course, I know the resume is equally as important. But are there differences between because I've been hiring manager and work with students as well who are looking for positions. Are there differences? I mean, we just talked about age, which of course we would never do in a North American document.
Right.
Are there other things that we should be aware of when we're working with our students that are particular to Israel?
Well, I know that a few of the students that I worked with did work with their tutors on cover letters, but there was nowhere for them to attach the cover letter. They could affix the resume, but they couldn't affix the cover letter. So that was sort of interesting. In North America, you can always write something and include
Right.
a cover letter.
When you're using a database, the only thing that displays automatically is the resume. And then sometimes the LinkedIn profile actually displays as well, depending on how you have your database set up. The cover letter you actually have to separately go to if you're interested in reading it. So I would argue that the resume is definitely more important than the cover letter. And I'm not sure whether the patience to read an elaborate cover letter is going to be sustained after you've reviewed a resume. So I would say that arguably the resume is more important to get all those points, as many points across as you can within the structure that you have.
But are there any Israeli things that need to be considered?
No, I can't think of anything offhand right now.
Okay.
The date of birth it throws me every time, even though I'm used to it, but people do include it sometimes.
So Susan, I just want to say that everything that you helped your student put into the cover letter, that wasn't wasted time because
Oh, yeah.
you spent a lot of time with the student, and then that can be information that would be used in a job interview.
Right.
different.
Absolutely.
It's a different selling
Absolutely.
feature than the resume.
Right, absolutely. And that's where I said a lot of conversational things can be included in an interview that you wouldn't put in a resume, so, or a covering letter. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Thank you. Thank you both, all of you. Very
Marla?
helpful.
Ruth.
What
Sher-
I'd like to do is just, sorry,
I'm sorry, Ruth, sure, when you have a chance, put
oh,
it
right,
in the chat and you can decide together how you want to respond. Just didn't want it to get lost.
right. Ruth, where are you? Are
I'm
you
right
going-
here. I wanted to ask two questions. One is just a very, very basic one that our students, and I know my children call this a resume a CV now. They don't call it
Yes.
resume. I know we grew up with resume. What is it actually called? Because he's addressing it as a CV. So what is it called? And then I have another question about guidance that they received in writing their CVs or resumes and whether you all agree with it or not. So I guess the first thing is it resume or CV? How should we be addressing it with them if they keep on seeing CV?
In Israel, they more commonly call it a CV, or the word that they use in Hebrew is more CV focused. But I mean, they're familiar with the term resume, but a CV is more commonly used here.
And
In
then
England, it's always called a CV. I was thrown
It's a
when
very European thing.
Americans who called it a resume. So,
In North America, they call it a resume, a CV.
Resume, yeah.
A CV stands for curriculum vitae, and that was
VT.
vitae, and that was more for, like, let's say, professors listing, you know, applying to a university and listing all the credentials and courses.
no,
Yeah.
in England,
yeah, and yeah,
Words are interchangeable, so don't worry about it.
yeah.
thank you.
Ruth,
And the
Ruth,
more
you had-
the more important question is that they were given the categorization that they should have in their work on the CV, and it just didn't make sense to me. So they basically, it seems like at the very top, I will forego it because it doesn't make sense. But the categories were summary, education, employment, skills, and languages. And it kind of threw me a little bit. So, I mean, I worked with that and helped him, optimize that. And then he's going to go back to his instructor with it. But I really don't understand the whole quote unquote summary and skills. I mean, it seems like somehow I'm confused. So I don't know why they're doing that. Is that the norm now?
No, I don't know why that's advice that they're getting. That's
And
not.
that was a direct thing from one of their classes. He just, sent me the exact
that-
thing from the classroom.
Well, one of the
Unfortunately,
things-
yeah.
I was just going to say, Marla, and we discussed it, and we said that one of the things we'd like to do is work with some of the instructors and people who
Tech career.
are at Tech Career, who are giving
Mhm.
them that first stage advice, because it's a whole mishmash. And I think to your point, Ruth, it would be helpful. And there's no one finite way to do it.
No.
I think actually Linda's going to show us an example.
Yeah.
Linda, do you want to show us?
Yes.
your screen
Thank
with
you.
the-
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Right. That's why I wanted to see what are the categories they should be focusing on, and then I can show it to him, and then he can discuss it with his instructor, the two ways of approaching it.
I actually have two CVs, and I wanted people to just take a cursory glance and see what they thought of each one. Please excuse my gravelly voice. I don't normally speak like this. I've got a...
Sounds good to me.
So CV
You're going to
one
share.
was the old one. Right. So what I'd like you to do is just have a look at this one, a cursory glance, and see how it is, and then see how he did improve it. I can't say it's perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but
Linda, go back to that just for a quick second. 'Cause I
Yeah.
think That's really important.
It
And
seems very busy to
That
me.
sort of goes to Ruth's point.
This is the first one that he sent in, okay? And then I wanted to show you another one, which he, after conversation on Zoom with me, he put together another one. Queenie, what did you want to say?
So what I
Sorry.
wanted to say is like right at the top, remember what Debbie said, if they're going to glance at the resume or the CV for about 10 or 12 seconds, right under full stack web developer, there's like, it looks like 3 paragraphs. It's not.
That's
It's
what I
one.
wanted to show you the second one.
I know. So this is, I just want to highlight that. And then they said, looking for my challenge in the high tech world where I can develop, contribute, and gain knowledge. That's what the student wants, but that's not what the employer wants. The employer has an opportunity that needs to be filled. And so that whole top section, which Linda's going to show you now, should address what the employer needs, not what the student wants. So Linda, show us the other example.
So I'll show you the other example.
Yeah.
Which share screen.
It had a lot of good words in it, but it was much too wordy. And so if you're skimming through it very quickly, there was way too much information.
So what we did was we put here the profile. I've also since then found out that full stack developer means absolutely nothing, because you're either a front end or you're a back end. This is me finding some information.
I got the same information from my son.
Yes.
That full stack develop. So if they have a preference, they can express that preference in their profile or on their resume.
So I would probably, this would need sort of ripping apart in a way, because it's not really saying very much. As Queenie says, it's saying about him. It's not what he's offering to the employer.
But it says creative thinking, adherence to procedures, technical ability, in-depth what? In-depth knowledge?
Fast learning.
Maximize,
this was
said, highly motivated to maximize my knowledge.
So it possibly could be, I don't know, put in fewer words than that.
It's still much easier to read. The bullets make points.
So we put, you know, titles. The other thing that is really important if you're a recruiter, I feel anyway, this is from my experience, because it was something I was always looking for, is a gap. So if there's a 2-year gap, I mean, I did ask somebody the other week, what were you doing in that 2 years? He didn't want to tell me. I have a feeling he might have been elsewhere. I'm not sure, but he didn't want to tell me. But, you know, as an employer or as a recruiter, I would certainly want to know where he was in that 2 years and what was happening.
And that things have really changed since COVID. So a lot of people might have gaps now that they didn't have before.
It's true, but it's a question they may get asked.
Right.
You know, did you do anything worthwhile during your time off during COVID? This was work experience.
So this resume is going
on to 2 pages.
Yeah, it's on 2.
He did his military service and he volunteers. And this is his language skills. The one thing I wanted to say is that, as Debbie said before, recruiters want certain words to jump out at them. But this is a basic CV resume. It's a basic one, and then they should be able to sort of top it, tail it if you want, for the particular job. You must emphasize to them, they cannot send out the same CV to every employer. You know, you get people now, I'm going to send out 100 of these to every employer. Maybe if you try doing that, maybe one will drop, but one interview, but probably won't happen. I think nowadays it seems that LinkedIn is very, very to the fore. I asked my granddaughter, who's in HR in a government department here, and she said they use LinkedIn all the time. So the use of words, specific words, and these are the things that are going to jump out. Marla.
So, first of all, thank you guys. And it seems like we're getting into some really technical areas, and my concern for the tutor population as a whole is that most of us are not in the high-tech field, and most of us are not human resources people. And so we have a very engaged group that's on the screen today that asked amazing questions, but I'm also thinking of this recording and its access to our population as a whole. And I guess I'm interested in, for those tutors who don't have the same professional experience and haven't worked in HR, may have looked at resumes as a manager or in other ways, what are the sort of key things that we want people to walk away from today so that you're not feeling like, oh, well, I don't have the experience of Queenie and Linda and Debbie. What role can I play? So maybe there's other people who've raised their hands. Maybe you'll use that as our sum up, but I didn't want to lose that thought because I want people to feel empowered and comfortable working with whatever skills or level of comfort that they have with this process, should their student.
I agree with you, Marla. I agree totally. I don't want people to go away from here or from the recording feeling, oh gosh, you know, I'm going to stop doing this. I need to be a professional, and it's not like that at all. You just want to help them to really put together some sentences that will highlight their skills. And that's really what you want to help them with.
And I'll
What
jump in and
I've
say,
always said to people is that a resume, go ahead, Queen.
no, it's okay, Debbie, go ahead. Debbie?
One of the things that I always tell people, yeah, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always tell people is that a resume should project your value. And that's the bottom line. I want to see your resume and know what kind of value you're bringing me as a hiring manager or as a recruiter. And so that's the attitude. That is the approach that you can help them with. Instead of just a laundry list of what you've done, tell me your value. Your resume should, when I read your resume, I should understand that. And that's what you can really help them with, is just understanding that concept of what the resume, how the resume should present them.
And as tutors, you know your students best. You've worked with them for a while now, so you could say, wow, I can't believe that you're not highlighting that level of excitement, blah, blah. You know, you've heard them describe so many different things that they're doing or have done, and you can even refresh their memory and remind them about some of their transferable skills that they may not even recognize that they have. So I think that's our value as tutors, is to be a reflection of what their best skills are, what their transferable skills are. And don't worry so much about where it fits in on the resume. That's not your job. Your job is to help them use positive words, strong words, action words, sell themselves in the best possible way. And to actually look at a job description and say, what's that employer looking for? Can you meet those requirements? What do you have that can match what they're looking for? And you can be playing that matching game, help them play that game. I think, Terry, you had a question.
Oh, I did. I think, did the last presenter mention, I wasn't sure about this, that they should have different versions of the resume? You know, I don't know if they're applying for sort of a certain standard level type job. Would they have sort of, this is their main resume and maybe you have a different version or two where something's tweaked, but was I to understand they should be doing different
Well,
resumes
you know what,
frequently?
you have a basic one and they're applying, right now they're applying for a basic level. Sometimes people are
Right.
looking for a management job. And if they're looking for a management job, depending on the field that they're looking for, you have to sell yourself in different ways. These young people are applying for either front end or back end in
Right.
industry. So I don't think we have to worry about let's help them with one
Okay.
good version
Yeah.
and then they can adapt. And if they look at the job description and that specific job is requiring certain things, they have to look at their CV to say, oh, have I mentioned that? Oh, for the last time I sent it out, they didn't need that. So let me include this. So it should be flexible.
Thanks.
I hope that helps. Somebody else?
There's a couple comments in the chat, which I think are worth responding to. And I think that it gets to sort of one of the concerns we had in doing this is that we didn't want people to think there's one format or one way to present a resume. And so maybe the three of you could respond to that. And just sort of as we're coming up to the top of the hour, if there's other questions, now is the time to ask. And two, is there any sort of summary comments you guys want to make up to the role of the tutor as a non-HR, non-high-tech person to kind of keep front and center in mind as they go through this process?
Let me just talk about structure. Some people, especially at the entry level, I will typically ask people to go back. I'll send them, after we speak, I'll say, get me a list of what you think your greatest qualities are that would be attractive to an employer. You can always include that qualifications or highlights at the top of the resume in terms of structure. Another thing that you can do that people sometimes do is include accomplishments. People who've served in the Army for long periods of time, who've had a lot of success there, who've achieved officer rank or who've been able to make a difference in the Army, that is something that they can include under accomplishments. I mean, there are different things like this that you can add into a resume. There's no hard and fast rule. And another thing that I sometimes suggest they do if they want to, or I can go along with very happily, is the use of color to highlight certain words. Or the use of bolding or different kinds of formatting to highlight different words or sentences. That's something that people can do as long as it's not ubiquitous and it's not, every other word. I think it's something that is very useful for people.
I think one of the things that's really important is that they have to be putting their best foot forward. So anything that makes them stand out from everybody else, do they have any? One of the last students I spoke to, I think had 4 languages. I went, wow, and was proficient in 4 languages. So something like that, I said, that should be highlighted. And to them it was, oh, really? Like they didn't realize it was such a big deal. So anything that you know about your student that you think is good, amazing, different, you point it out to them. And I think that will be really helpful. Our job is to make them feel good about themselves and to present themselves in the best possible way.
Michelle asked about setting up a website, whether that would be helpful. I don't think so in this case. I think having GitHub and LinkedIn will be, GitHub should allow them to showcase what they've done, especially because they're beginners. I think there's too much opportunity for things to kind of go south with a website. So I wouldn't use that. I wouldn't recommend that right now.
I think that's really helpful for
Oops, we
my
lost you.
Right here.
I'm sorry.
Larry,
Michelle,
are
we-
I
you,
think she's frozen.
I'm sorry. Is somebody?
I think Michelle was speaking, but she froze. So you know what, Larry, why don't you ask your question?
I had a quick question,
Michelle-
maybe I missed it, but do you have PDF files of sample resumes that you could send?
That'd be helpful.
We can. The thing is, they
Like
have,
those
we have,
the examples
Yes.
that you had put up there?
we can. We just have to scrub the personal information,
Oh, okay.
make sure it's not included in the resume. So it might take a little bit of time, but
Okay.
I
Sorry?
had suggested to my student that she put her school projects in the resume under experience. Where else might,
I mean, they should be, I hear Michelle's question was whether the school project should be included in the resume under experience. And I think that that's the kind of thing that GitHub will display for her. Rather
So
than,
Debbie, to that point, maybe at the top, if it's really critical, it could be related projects or related experience, and that could be highlighted.
it can be if they're really, if they have the
it's-
kind of,
Yeah, if it's really
right.
outstanding, it could be a related project or
correct.
a special
Right.
project, right up at
That's
the top.
good, yes.
thanks.
Okay.
Ruth asks, is the Israeli support team working or not working with Queenie, Linda, and Debbie? Israeli CV support team, is that the CV support team at Tech Career or La Merchak? Are you guys in direct connection at all with the partners? And I don't think so, right?
I'm in
We're not-
with Minna. I speak to Minna.
Right.
Yeah, but she's not
Right.
working directly with the students, so
No.
we have not had communication with the people who are actually working with the students, and Marla
In Tech Career,
and Mina are gonna put something together to start.
to try to get that relationship going, yeah.
Career knows that you guys are working on resumes and they've asked us to do this. And I do want to differentiate between the level of the regular tutor. That's right, Ruth, someone named Iris is helping them. The regular tutor and this team that we've assembled who have relevant professional experience that they're sharing on behalf of our students. So you as tutors do not have to feel like you have to understand everything that's going on that goes into the final product. Your role, I think, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Linda, Debbie, and Queenie, your role is to enhance the vocabulary and then also to even look at things as simple as capitalization, syntax, punctuation, etc., so that some of those things that most of us as native English speakers could see in an instant could be cleaned up a little before the resumes go to either the Tech Career people and or this team. Your job as a tutor is not to finalize this resume or make sure it's job presentable ready.
Yeah.
You're a piece of a process to enhance vocabulary, help the student have a richer, more diverse way of describing what they've done.
Use stronger positive words.
Stronger positive
describe-
words.
Yeah.
And then, and that you don't have to feel responsible for that student's final product. You're a piece of a process to enhance that if your student wants to use you that way and if you're comfortable.
Marla, if one of our tutors wants to take the resume that they've helped their student with and then refer to us, should they do that through you? Should they, how do you?
Should check with their student, and maybe it's better if the student takes the initiative to go the next step to you guys. Just because I think we want the student to own this process. And I also want you guys not to be overwhelmed with requests coming in from too many sources. I think
Thank
that's a better thing. They may or may not know that you guys exist. So if they don't, it's really great for the tutor to say there are 3 people that have been designated. And I think we just recently sent out, somebody documented for me a process. I'll make sure that I reiterate that process in a communication so that people are clear.
Thank you.
Good.
anything else? I mean, I think this was, I hope, really helpful. Give you some insight, and we don't have to end the conversation here. If you guys as tutors continue to share with me what your issues are, what your needs are, we will, do our best to bring you resources and insights to help your student. That's why we're all here.
And as Debbie and Linda said before, if any of you want to send us sometimes Debbie or Linda will send me a resume, or I'll send them one and say, I've worked on this with a student, do you have any idea? So we're not the penultimate experts either. We try to share ideas with each other. And so if we can help any one of you, that's our pleasure. We're here to help.
Thank you so much, everybody. And I just want to
Thank
say
you.
happy Hanukkah to everyone. It's
Right.
coming up.
Let them.
Chag Sameach to
Chag
everybody.
Sameach, Chag Sameach.
And thanks again, Debbie and Linda and Queenie, for everything you're doing and for your willingness and ability to share insights on this process with our tutor community. Most appreciated.
Great pleasure.
Thanks.
Chag Sameach.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Toda.